Hey guys, Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, back with another teaching moment. In this video, I'm going to teach you guys all about labor market impact assessments. And it is so much more than just what is an LMIA. Many of you are here in Canada right now wondering what the future holds for you. You've got a work permit, maybe a post-grad, maybe something else that's expiring, and there have not been any draws. You're not sure what to do? Well, one of the options that we recommend more than anything else is that labor market impact assessment. So in this video, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna pull in the very first lesson that I charge people for that explains the LMIA process from both an employee perspective and that of your employer. So this isn't just for you guys. It's important that you understand how it works, but an LMIA is an employer-driven process. And the course that I've created is exactly designed to help your employer navigate that process as easy as possible because it's their responsibility so that they can keep you here in Canada. I'm gonna flip over here and I'll show you quick. This LMIA course, I'm giving you lesson 1 for free. You can go, you can check it out. And the reality is the course covers everything, but we hit on all of this stuff in this lesson 1. The basics, recruiting, just everything you could imagine. So head on over. Well, you can click on the link to subscribe if you want to, but just stick around and watch this video. It will be worth it. Take care. Hello, my name is Mark Holthe. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer, ex-immigration officer, and former high school teacher. I've taken the very best from each of those roles and created something that I'm pretty proud of, and that is the Canadian Immigration Institute. And this course that you are currently attending is just one of many where I'm teaching people how to navigate the complexities of Canadian immigration law. And in this particular lesson, you and I are going to dive into the Temporary Foreign Worker Program a little bit and learn a little bit more about labor market impact assessments. And without further ado, let's just shift over there. All right, so like I indicated before, this here is the very first lesson within Module 1, Temporary Foreign Worker Program, Learning the Basics. In this lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and then we're going to dive into some of the main components of an LMIA. So there's a refusal to process list. You have to know whether or not you're on that list, because if you are, there's no point going forward. Proof of business legitimacy. Well, that goes without saying. You're obviously a legitimate business, but IRCC has a lot of businesses that are not, who are trying to scam the system, and so they have to find a way to weed out the genuine ones from those that are not. Then we're going to cover the 2 most important components of an LMIA: recruiting and wages. All right, so right at the start, the first thing that you need to consider is the work that's being performed, or I should say, whatever this foreign national that's coming to provide assistance to your company, are they actually, is it going to be considered work under the Immigration Act? And so work is actually defined as an activity for which wages are paid or commission is earned, or that competes directly with activities of Canadian citizens or permanent residents in the Canadian labor market. So basically what this is saying is that if they have been recruited and they're coming to work for you, well, and they're being paid, you're going to need a work permit for them. And in this case, that would be a labor market impact assessment. But this is also saying, even if you have someone volunteering or taking pre-employment training, where that training is producing some work product that a Canadian normally would have been paid to do, well, that could be also considered an activity that requires a work permit. So is this foreign national taking away an opportunity from one of your workers? If the answer is yes, then you're probably going to need a work permit. And if we dive in a little bit deeper here, this is the process that I go through when I'm trying to determine what work permit fits. So the first thing I ask is, okay, is there a person that's being recruited to fill a position within a company? If yes, then a work permit is always going to be required. Then the next question is there a way I can get around having to go through this labor market impact assessment process? And so I personally, as an immigration lawyer, we'll examine whether there's some exemption. Maybe there's a work permit that's available through IRPA, which is the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, or a treaty such as NAFTA or the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, whatever it's called at the time in which you're watching this. Or is there another program that I can benefit from where the company, you, can get a work permit for this foreign national without you having to access the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and the LMIA process? So if the answer is no to an exemption, then yes, we are dealing with having to apply to get approval from ESDC, and Employment and Social Development Canada is actually the government department that administers it, but I should say they're the ones who run it, but Service Canada is the delivery arm of ESDC. So you're applying to Service Canada through the Temporary Foreign Worker Program to get this magical LMIA, which will allow you to hire a foreign national. All right, let's talk about the basics here. So the very first thing you need to understand is that I'm going to be teaching you a lot of things, but don't rely specifically on what I'm teaching you in my PowerPoints. Always go back to the very source. And in this case, this link will actually take us back to the government website. And you can see up here in the top, if it's kind of highlighting a little bit in the blue, it's the website for Employment and Social Development Canada. Hire a temporary foreign worker. I've drilled down a little bit further to the page where we're determining whether or not we want to hire a worker in a high wage or a low wage position. And I'm not going to get into that yet, but that's an important distinction because that will tell you what direction you need to go in order to know you're submitting the right type of application, because they're treated differently. I guess I will just jump down quickly because I'm already here. I'll scroll down so you can see what this high wage, low wage thing really is all about. So depending upon the province you're in, if your wage, as you can see here, is higher than the wage that's listed in the column, and in this case, it's going to be at the right, and the last time this was updated was April the 22nd of 2019, you always want to go back and check this because these dollar figures could change. If the wage you're paying your foreign worker, for example, if you are in, let's go with Ontario here, you can see it used to be before $22.50, but that wage will continue to increase. Thus, it's important to keep going back here. So $23.08 right now, as of the date of doing this video, is the wage threshold. So if you're paying your worker more than $23.08 per hour, then you're going to be classified as a stream for high wage positions. So this is right here. You must apply under the stream for high wage positions. And if I click on this link, then it takes me to the specific information and instructions that are required in order to submit an LMIA application for the purposes of hiring someone in a high wage position. And this is also, it's important to note that this is not the process if you want to support them to obtain permanent residence. So that's a little bit different. It's close, but it's not exactly the same. This is entirely designed to bring in a foreign worker temporarily with the expectation that they are going home. So for example, if you are a trucking company and you are paying an individual in excess of, and let's say you're in Ontario, in excess of $23.08, maybe you're paying them $25 an hour, then you are going to be submitting an application through the high wage process. And there are certain aspects of this, such as transition plans, that apply specifically to this type of situation. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly, and there will be links here that you can click on. And this PowerPoint presentation, I will also make this available or provide the links so that you can easily find where you need to go to get the actual application form and instructions. Okay, remember, this is an employer-driven process. It doesn't really have much to do with the foreign national, at least in terms of getting the LMIA. And the underlying principle is that you must prove that there are no Canadians or permanent residents available to do the job before you can hire that foreign national. And it's much more difficult in recent years. Now, some industries, and I keep going back to trucking industry because that's a good one to talk about now because there's huge shortages across the country and especially in Ontario. And so, it's more difficult, and the government has made it much more challenging to meet the requirements in the last few years. So you really need to pay close attention. Now, I do, before we get any further, want to share with you my top 5 reasons that your LMIA is going to get refused. All right, first one on the list, you dared to even submit an application in the first place. Now, I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because I swear the officers these days are going out of their way to find any reason they can to refuse these applications. So understand right off the bat that, there's a number of factors at play here. And so many of you who are watching this know that our federal election hasn't been decided yet. Well, I've got it kind of crossed off, but the reality is both of those, whether it hasn't been decided yet or a federal election has been decided, it's unbelievably political. So 2019 is when I'm generating this particular lesson. And we have an election coming up, and whether the Liberals stick around or whether the Conservatives supplant them, that does have a direct impact on these processes. And so sometimes, the gears are put on those civil servants to make the process just really, really difficult because they don't want to have a ton of foreign workers. So understand, that's a reality. And then I actually crossed off number 2 there because probably by the time most of you have been watching this, the election will have been decided. So that's why you've got 2 number 2s there. But number 3, you seriously expected it to be approved on the first try. Do not feel discouraged if you do get shut down the first time, because this is not a simple process. It is so easy for it to fall off the rails. And unless you are retaining a fine law firm like mine or someone who's had a lot of experience doing this, sometimes you have to learn through the school of hard knocks. And everybody learns when they realize what didn't work the first time, then they can fix it and do better the next time. Now, my responsibility is to make sure that if I'm representing you, or whoever your representative is that you're paying, that they get it right the first time. But realities, like it is a reality. It is not entirely as straightforward as the government website might make it seem. Okay, number 4, my 4th reason why LMIAs get bounced. Well, despite your solid evidence, the officer just didn't feel there were shortages in your industry. So I'm going to give a shout out to the trucking industry because your barrier, the bar that you have to meet in terms of establishing shortages in your industry, especially in Ontario, are not as nearly as high as someone who's trying to, say, employ just a general construction laborer, for instance. Okay, in some industries, this burden is going to be lower, but often officers will come back with their own data and they'll say, look, we just don't feel that there are shortages. And I'll cover that later in future lessons. And then the 5th one, just because, now go away. Okay, now it's probably not quite that bad, but sometimes it feels like it, at least for me. Okay, so hope you're all in the trucking industry. If you're not, hey, just keep fighting. Don't give up. Okay, so let's get into the main areas that I talked about. And within this presentation, you'll see very quickly that this is just kind of a placeholder, this PowerPoint, because what I want to focus on and what's really important is that when we're doing this, and if I can get my mouse to appear here, looks like it's disappeared on me. This is where sometimes you have little glitches when you're doing this, and sometimes it works good and sometimes it doesn't. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to shrink this one down. Actually, I'm going to escape this, get this back up and get this going. And then hopefully I got control. There's my mouse. Okay. So main areas, refusal to process list. Okay, let's dive into this because if you are on the list, then don't even bother because you're not going to go any further than this. So here's the site. And these decisions that are being made to bar certain industries or employers from applying are based on both regulatory authority and ministerial instruction. So I'm not going to go through a lot of these in detail, but you can go here, you can look yourself. Essentially, they don't like anything in the sex trade industry. And if you've also been previously on the government's naughty list, so the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada ineligibility list, and I guess we could click on this and just take a look. if you have not behaved yourself in the past with the foreign worker program, you could very well find yourself on this list together with fines for having been non-compliant. And if you're on this list, then you are barred from applying for future temporary foreign workers. So understand that this is serious. This is really serious stuff. If you're going to do it, you have to follow the rules. So if you've been banned, found non-compliant, all these different things because of this regulatory authority, then you won't get through the gate. And then there are specific ministerial instructions. So this is from time to time, based on the economy, based on a number of factors. Certain businesses are just, the industry, they feel, just is not in need to the same extent for foreign workers. And so they've created certain outright bars for them. So you can see here on this list, low wage positions. And now we're going to focus primarily these lessons on high wage, but low wage positions in the accommodation and food service and retail trade sectors have certain barriers. And like I said, I'm not going to get into there now, but just know that it exists. If you are watching this and you're applying under one of these industries, then be aware there are factors that can prohibit you from applying. Then low wage positions above the current cap. So there's a cap on the number of low wage positions certain businesses can, they can fill with foreign nationals. So there's a cap. And then there are certain high wage and low occupations in certain provinces, like Alberta, for instance. And so, for example, if I click on this one, you'll see that certain positions in Alberta are specifically prohibited. If you're applying for an LMIA and the position that you're applying for is on this list, then you are not going to be able to continue forward with your application. It's just, you're barred. In-home caregivers, and if you have had a labor market impact assessment revoked in the past 2 years. Okay, so there's a little bit of an overview of this refusal to process list. Okay, now let's jump into the proof of business legitimacy. So every business has to show that they are a real business and not scammers. And so, like I said, I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of detail about this, but you have to be a solvent business. You have to have the money to be able to actually fill the position. So you can see here, ability to fill the terms of the job offer. In the process of applying, you have to produce your Schedule 100s and Schedule 125s for your T2s. And they ask for you to, you have to submit at least one of the following documents. So for your company, one of these ones, and like I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail at this stage, but you have to choose and you have to provide one so the government can assess your financials to see if you have enough income to actually support the position you're trying to fill, or positions if you're filling multiple ones. Then you have to prove that you're actually in business, that you're providing a good or service. So then once again, at least one of these. And in most cases, businesses will maybe have a business license, or they've got their T4 summary of remuneration paid, PD7As for their employees, and there are the ability to provide an attestation. And that usually comes from an accountant or someone who's in a position to be able to attest to basically that your business is operating. Okay. And then they will also assess the reasonable employment needs of the business, which is almost kind of like second guessing what you're telling the government. So you're saying, I need these people. I've got a real shortage here. And then the government looks at you and says, well, based on your industry, our data says otherwise. So usually this tends to tackle specific industries like in-home caregivers, foreign vessels, things like that. So it doesn't really come up a ton for like the trucking industry, for instance. And then some provinces have other obligations, other things that need to be provided. And you can just go through and see, depending upon the province, there may be some added components. So that is proof of business legitimacy, and every company needs to provide it. And if IRCC determines that you don't have enough income, you could do everything right within the application and they could still refuse it on that basis. All right. Okay, now let's jump into the most important two other components. Proof of recruitment. So every employer who is looking to obtain a labor market impact assessment has to follow these recruitment expectations very, very carefully. And I've got a separate lesson that's going to go through in detail, but I just want to hit it at a high level. So when you're applying, you have to meet these strict recruitment and advertising requirements. So you can see that you must conduct at least, and if I can highlight this, 3 different recruitment activities. And one of them has to be with Canada's Job Bank. And I'll click on here quickly, and there are videos to help you register as an employer if you haven't already, and posting your job here within the Job Bank. That is a mandatory requirement. The government created it, so they're forcing as many people as possible to use it so that it breathes life into it and makes it actually useful. Okay, so one of the advertisements has to be on the Government of Canada's Job Bank, and then the other 2 additional methods have to be consistent with the occupation, as it says here. So in other words, they have to target an audience that is appropriate for the education, professional experience, or skill level required for the occupation. So you're probably not going to be looking for a doctor, for instance, on Kijiji, but you may be looking for a truck driver on Kijiji. You know, it's just possible. So, but the key is that it has to be consistent with your particular occupation. Okay. In addition to these 2 additional methods, one of them must be national in scope and easily accessed by residents of any province or territory, as people in high wage positions, and remember, this is what we're looking at here, are often much more mobile than someone who's being paid the lower wage. So it's unlikely to get someone to move from Nova Scotia to Alberta to take a position at minimum wage working at McDonald's as a food counter attendant. But you may have someone who is, let's say, a truck driver who is used to making about $70,000 a year, who decides to move from Alberta to Ontario for more opportunities in the trucking industry. So the advertising that you use has to be national in scope that would target this person. It can't just be located, say, in Toronto, an area. All right. And so that's basically the minimum recruitment. Now, in addition to this, I haven't got into specific details, but there's even specific requirements with what the content of those ads needs to look like. But we'll cover that in the next video. Now, the last one, prevailing wage requirements. You can't just advertise whatever you want for a wage. Well, let me back up. Most people don't want to include the wage in their advertisement, but IRCC, generally speaking, and if we're focusing on the trucking industry, will not let you get away with posting those ads unless you're posting the wage. Why? Because they feel that Canadians, if they know what the wage is, are going to be more likely to apply. And when it comes to wage, the wage has to be something called the prevailing wage rate. And so for the purposes of the temporary foreign worker program, you must pay the prevailing wage, which is defined as the highest of either one of the 2 things here. The median wage on the Job Bank, and I will once again go into that and show you a little bit more in another video, or a wage that is within the wage range that you're paying your current employees hired for the same job and work location with the same skills and years of experience. So that is the highest of either of these. So if Job Bank says one thing, but you're actually paying your employees higher, then that's what you're going to pay. If you're paying your Canadian employees one thing, but the Job Bank says you should be paying them more because that's what the median wage is, then guess what? Most foreign companies that employ foreign nationals are paying a premium for those workers. So be prepared for that. All right. So that's just a very, very general, high-level introduction to the temporary foreign worker program, and I hope that it was helpful. Join me in lesson 2 as we dive in just a little bit deeper into the labor market impact assessment process. Okay, take care.